We're going to talk about the influence and the power of Pulp Fiction. I'm Elvis Mitchell, and to my left,
I'm Scott Fondas.
Stephanie Zaharik.
Tim Lucas.
And Andy Klein.
Scott, where did you first see Pulp Fiction?
If I'm not mistaken, I saw Pulp Fiction at my local movie theater in Tampa, Florida, when I was in high school, and was starting to review movies in my high school newspaper, and
So you reviewed it?
and also on a public access TV program. So I did review Pulp Fiction. That would be the first movie of Quentin's that I actually reviewed in some format. And I mean, I think the difference from Reservoir Dogs to Pulp Fiction is, you go from an extremely promising film to a film where you already feel, really from the opening titles, that you're, in the hands of a true master. Everything in Pulp Fiction, from the font of the titles to the radio changing stations under the credits. Right from the beginning, that movie just grabs you and it says, this is something to be reckoned with. This is the work of someone who is in complete command of every element on the screen.
Stephanie?
I wasn't crazy about it, and I have to say, even at this point, it is the most beautifully constructed movie that I really can't love all that much.
Whoa.
Well,
Explique, s'il vous plaît.
There seemed to be a kind of smirkiness in the attitude, in his attitude toward the characters and toward the material that I just didn't respond to.
You felt that in the opening scene in the diner between Amanda Plummer and Tim Roth? You felt that was smirky?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did, and I just, the whole thing felt it felt too self-conscious to me. I kind of felt that it was very well made, but there was kind of a remoteness to it that I just didn't respond to.
The remoteness that you didn't see in Reservoir Dogs, even? Did it
I
feel
did see
different?
it there. That's one of the reasons I didn't like Reservoir Dogs.
So they felt distant to you.
They felt distant.
Was there anything that you responded to that you ended up really liking in Pulp Fiction?
Actually, there are several things. I love the dance sequence and everything that leads up to it. That scene is so beautifully shot. You get to see their whole bodies. I mean, I can't tell you how many movies made within the last 20 or 30 years where everything is like so chopped up. And it's like, no, I want to see the bodies move. There's this moment I was watching him, he does that little thing where he like gets up on his toes. I was like, ouch, it's gotta hurt, but it like looks so great, So, I mean, I can't say, oh, I hate everything about this movie. That's certainly not true, but I have to admit, I kind of cherry pick. I have like certain favorite parts, and of course, I shot Marvin in the face. I mean, how can you not love that, So.
Okay. I'm sorry, just so sentimental about Marvin being shot in the face. Tim?
Well, I actually saw Pulp Fiction for the first time on DVD. And one of the things I remember hearing at the time was that Quentin was claiming that Mario Bava's Black Sabbath had been his inspiration for doing a kind of anthology arrangement. And it's not really an anthology so much as it's one sort of epic story that's
Just been shuffled.
lopped up and shuffled in a different order to entice the viewer. And watching it again, I keep noticing little things. Like there are continuities of character. Like between Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, in Pulp Fiction, John Travolta plays Vincent Vega. And Michael Madsen plays Vic Vega in Reservoir Dogs. And so you're thinking, are these like brothers? What's the story
So they
here?
have the same hair even.
And actually, looking at the deleted sequences in Reservoir Dogs, the person that Chris Penn is talking about, the person he was going to get, the medical advisor, is a nurse that he knows named Bonnie. So this sets you up for the Bonnie situation part in Pulp Fiction. And this is actually part of a tradition that goes all the way through Pulp Fiction with Sax Rohmer inventing Fu Manchu and carrying him over a series of novels.
See, that's the comic book thing for me, too. There's a kind of continuity that comes from those things where they're all part of instead of the Marvel universe, it's the Tarantino universe.
Yeah, exactly.
Andy?
Red Apple cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I first saw it at the first big press screening in L.A. And I had really liked Reservoir Dogs. It was on my top 10 list, but I didn't say this is the greatest film of the last 10 years or anything like that. With Pulp Fiction, I really did feel that way. I thought, I mean, unlike Stephanie, I really loved it from the start. I mean, to me, it was like eating, rich ice cream. Every moment was either funny or something really interesting was going on screen. I'm not sure that there's a slow moment in the film. Even Christopher Walken doing a monologue, and theoretically that should have slowed things down, but it doesn't. Certainly I was with a good audience, which helped. The person in front of me laughed so hard that the seat broke and they had to go sit someplace else. Structurally, there's this debt to The Killing, the Kubrick film, which is a great movie. Traditionally, if you're going to have a flashback, there'll be somebody sitting there about to tell a story and their face will go hazy, that sort of thing. Here in The Killing, it was just for the sake of doing it, and how that managed to create the suspense in a different way. The same is true here. I know people who said, well, it's all out of order for no reason, which seemed really silly to me because a lot of the pleasure is the way things are doled out to you and the order in which you get them.
One of the things that made this movie feel more real to me than Reservoir Dogs, I sort of felt like they were kind of wearing costumes. And this felt the way people dress. I mean, that outfit that Uma Thurman wears, just the leggings and the big white shirt.
That's water bell bottoms.
Yes, that's what somebody would wear. These felt like real clothes to me. That and the Samuel L. Jackson Jerry curl, which is the most wonderful thing in the history of movies. I mean, you see somebody with a Jerry curl in 1994 when even bus drivers and 7-Eleven clerks no longer had Jerry curls, was a real statement about who this guy was. It also explained why he's wearing a black suit, so you wouldn't.
Well,
have
but I would say the black suits are one respect in which I think the costumes aren't exactly, naturalistic or everyday kind of out of the closet sort of things.
Well,
I mean, I think
the thing is almost everybody has a black suit.
Yeah, and
And
Uma
they're
Thurman
rumpled,
is very
though. They're slightly
stylized in her
rumpled.
way. I mean, I think everybody in the movie kind of imagines themselves in a movie. I mean, before Vincent and Jules go into that apartment, one of them
They're
says,
getting in character.
"Yeah, let's get into character." And I think that's a telling thing because I think more and more, as he's gone along, it's not just that Quentin references movies in his movies; it's that the characters have this heightened awareness of pop culture.
But it's still
I think
the way
they
the people
imagine
But
themselves
I think
going
it's the way
in
those
and
people
out
would
of
do
a
that. Those
movie.
guys would imagine this is the way thugs would dress.
Exactly.
Because
yeah.
again, if you were really that conscious of it, you wouldn't have a Jerry curl in 1994. I cannot emphasize this enough.
Spread it around. Get him up there a little bit. Vincent's hair.
Even the way after they get hosed down, do you notice he kind of plays with it? He's like,
Yes.
gotta make sure that it's, I get it.
But he tenses up. He's thinking, what's going to happen to my activator if they put this water in my hair?
Quentin tells a story about the Jerry curl that it was an accident, really, that he asked for an afro wig and the costume or
The hair
makeup
person brought
person,
the
the hair
brother.
person didn't know the difference and brought the Jerry curl and
And Sam demanded that he keep it.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, no.
but it's
Finish
for
the
me,
story.
No, I just felt like it, and seeing it where I saw it, I was the only person insanely moved to laughter by it because it was just such an honest thing. Again, it felt like that kind of, this one felt more real to me than Reservoir Dogs. And that's why I was wondering where you said you thought it felt kind of smirky to you. And did it not feel honest at all?
It didn't feel. When you say it felt honest, I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of those details, and it still feels smart alecky to me. Like I love the braggadocio of the filmmaking, and I love the structure. When Vincent dies, midway through, and then he comes back, I was like, hey, wait a minute, he's dead. You can't bring it. That's not playing by the rules, And then I was like, oh, that's the way it's supposed to be, And so I love that. I mean, I love when that sort of thing happens. But there's just something a little. It just feels very self-conscious to me. I know a lot of younger critics who said, "My God, this is a revelation. This is going to change filmmaking." And actually, it did change filmmaking, although I wish. Now, here's the other thing. Why on earth do we have so many people influenced by Quentin Tarantino's movies as they should be influenced, and yet they're not looking at Howard Hawks or Brian De Palma, or they don't realize like how important the whole history of filmmaking is, which is one thing that he recognizes, even in the movies I don't like, you know. So he's done all of his homework.
But it's not just movies, and it's that the movie itself makes an entrance this time. I mean, the credits in black against that screen, it's just sort of saying, I'm making a movie this time with movie stars and with people who should be movie stars.
You know, the filmmaking definitely shows off, but it doesn't show off in the way of like a Scorsese film with really elaborate tracking shots, or Brian De Palma, you know, as very ostentatious kind of stylistic gestures. To me, it is more in, you know, what people wear, how they walk, how they talk, you know, these kind of, the way that you know, this sort of Tarantino universe is permeating every corner of the frame, because the shots themselves and the lighting and that kind of thing is actually really very, very simple, very elegant, very not calling attention to itself. And I think, you know, Jackie Brown is very much like that also. And then, you know, when you go into the Kill Bill movies, you have a completely different aesthetic. Also, wanting to film in parts of Los Angeles and South Bay that are like unchanged by time, kind of capturing the Southern California of his own youth in a way.
Sure, I mean, even Butch's apartment, he sneaks back in and he puts the Ralph brand Pop-Tart in the toaster. And that really felt to me like a movie that was broadcasting that was about Southern California, but not West LA, not Santa Monica, not the spacious part, but the place
never
we live
west of the 405, for sure. But also, I understand what you talk about when you say the realism of the film, like in terms of relationships and things like that. But to me, the whole feel of the film is very surreal, or a heightened realism. It's like the scene in the cab, you know, with this incredible black and white rear projection, which you see a couple of times in the movie when people are driving.
I think there's a juxtaposition of that. I mean, going from the real to, because that moment in the cab is so incredibly surreal.
Yeah.
I mean, there are enough real moments in it to go along with the fact that it is epic. I mean, it's real, but it's not small. I mean, it's in a lot of ways very intimate, but there's a grandeur to it. That thing that I think people imitate him they can't bring that kind of size to the filmmaking. It feels like they get the small details and they worry about those, but there's no vision. I mean, there's no point of view there. And if you can't create characters, then you don't have points of view.
And they haven't done their homework. I mean, Quentin he knows the history of cinema, you know, probably as well as any filmmaker since Godard.
If you look at the movie too, I don't think it happens in Reservoir Dogs, but in this one, you get visual references to other movies. And I'm thinking specifically of Kiss Me Deadly with the suitcase, which opens. You never see the contents, but it seems to be gold. Some sort of honey-colored light seems to bathe people when they look inside this. And also, when Marsellus is introduced, you never see his face during the whole scene. And it just holds on Bruce Willis listening, which is a pretty audacious cinematic feat, because it's like what you don't see, you're left to imagine, and it becomes much more imposing.
But that's what you can really feel, a sort of sense of reality and theatricality simultaneously. I think is really a big part of the allure of the way he's able to sort of balance all of this stuff.
One of the great things about the hypodermic scene is the fact that he's basically crashed his car into the front of the house and taken out a nativity scene in front of the house. And so you know this is drawing attention to this very private thing that's going on in the house. And actually, my favorite line of dialogue in the movie happens during that scene when they're talking about the preparation for the shot, and Eric Stoltz says, I'm kind of curious about that myself. It's a wonderful, deflating thing. And if he didn't say that, my heart might have burst, you know, from suspense in that scene. It's just a great deflator.
Although when she wakes up, it's, to me, one of the funniest things in the movie. It's just such a precise bit of comic timing, that needle going in and her aghast, you know, rejuvenation. It
brings up and spirals
it's
back.
really, it's just perfectly done.
If you're all right, then say something.
Something? That was fucking trippy.
For me, Pulp Fiction is the one that sort of dances gracefully between all these different areas. That it's realistic and it's surrealistic and it's it's sort of intimate, but it's really got this amazing sort of emotional grandeur, and it's as much a piece. In fact, I think more a piece of emotional storytelling than narrative storytelling, because each of those stories, those characters, is completed, and that's why the shuffling works so ingeniously, because you might not have the patience to see these things played out in order, but seeing each thing sort of like worked out, getting bits and pieces of it, and then makes it all the more satisfying. I just think that all those imitations of it don't understand that not only do you have to have older actors in it, but you also have to let people finish out their storylines and be true to these characters and play out these romances.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the real sex scene in this film is the scene where he shoots up. And I think it's the most romantic depiction of heroin addiction I've ever seen. It's just unabashedly romantic. It's interesting that in a lot of the films you get these beautiful relationships between two people that don't connect sexually, but then you get a scene like this, which is a big payoff. And when you see Vincent in the car with the black and white rear screen projection, you know, that's like having a cigarette after sex. He's just going down the highway.
And the car is also kind of the girl for him, too. Remember how he talks about that car and caresses the car, and the whole speech about the car being keyed.
Right. Butch keyed the car. Seriously.
You think so?
Once during a Q&A with Quentin, I asked him to pin that one down because Travolta has just insulted him in the bar.
You looking at something, friend? You ain't my friend, Palooka.
And he goes out and keys the car. We just don't see it.
Is that why there's that sort of playing with the Zed's keys at the end? Because is that getting back to the keys, too?
Could be.
This is getting horribly
You know,
recognized, isn't it?
there's some very delicate things in there. I mean, a lot was written about the introduction of Mia Wallace in the film with the focus on her feet. But we've only heard about her before in relation to the foot massage story. So that's the way to introduce her. You know, this is what the Samoan was thrown out the window for.
Those feet, which become very important in Kill Bill.
Yes, they do. It's all, again, it's the Marvel Universe. Tales of Suspense, 166, all these things connect. I mean, you see the films, there are all these things that sort of pay off for the devoted viewer.
And he also taps into, as a filmmaker, a whole strata of films that most film directors don't consciously channel when they're designing a piece of work. So he will go into Enzo Castellari and Sergio Corbucci, you know, not just going to Hawks, you know, or Robert Aldrich. He digs for buried treasure.
What do you guys feel like it stands now? I mean, given the kind of approbation it got at that moment.
It seems to me that the only way in which the reputation has changed is that it's become part of the fabric now in a way that not more than most films get to be. You know, Casablanca becomes part of the fabric of the culture and everything refers to it. How many lines in Pulp Fiction have you heard people quote, 5,000 times? It's almost sort of not taken for granted, but it's part
It kind of is, because you don't think about the origin of the quotes anymore. They're part of the conversation now, in that way you were saying.
No, I think it's hard to think of a movie from the 90s that has contributed more sort of instantly recognizable lines or images to, the sort of the pop culture discourse.
When you permeate culture like that, when people get together and they swap lines from a movie that they love, it becomes more than just about the movie. It becomes something that people remember about times when they were together with their friends and experiences that they shared. So it becomes bigger than the movie.
The other thing, too, is people feel very protective of Pulp Fiction as if it were a shared secret. And this was a big movie. I mean, it was a big hit, but the way people talk about it, they're like, no, this belongs to me, this belongs to us, which is interesting, because sometimes people feel that way about little small, cult films. They feel like this really needs to be protected, but Pulp Fiction is like, sort of is in this bubble of like...
I think it's part of that's that sense of authorship that comes from him, that people really feel like these movies are their connection to him, and because he writes them and directs them, and his sensibility is so much a part of them. He doesn't collaborate in that way where, and he's not promiscuous about collaboration either. I mean, there's that sense of things running through, and I feel like for a lot of people, that sort of cult sense you're talking about as a movie it does feel like, again, both big and intimate at the same time. And because it satisfies a number of people in so many ways, that they still feel that sense of possessiveness about it. And I think that maybe extends to a lot of his films in general, though.
Another thing to remember about Pulp Fiction is that it was made for $8 million and it grossed over $100 million here, plus a ton around the world. And it was actually the first indie film to break the 100 million barrier.
And really the film that made Miramax into a box office power, a film that was basically something they picked up from another studio, but they really embraced him, and it began Miramax as the way we now think of it still, even all these years later.